When the Galactic Council demanded humanity's conformity, Ambassador Sarah Chen led humans in walking away, choosing chaos, freedom, and evolution over enforced harmony and stagnation. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council station echoed with the harmonious chimes that signaled an emergency session. Ambassador Sarah Chen straightened her formal diplomatic attire as she walked through corridors lined with representatives from 47 different species. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the varied atmospheric requirements, creating a subtle haze that caught the artificial starlight streaming through the massive viewports. Ambassador Chen clicked the insectoid Catherian representative, its mandibles creating the approximation of human speech. The council grows impatient. Your species has been difficult to manage lately. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Sarah paused, her expression neutral despite the condescending tone. Difficult to manage. We prefer independently minded. Thank you. The Catherian's compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. Your independence is precisely why we're here today. The Galactic Trade Consortium has filed 17 complaints about human commercial practices. The Zephyrian Empire claims your military is expanding beyond agreed-upon limits. And don't get me started on what your scientists did to the quarantine zone around Kepler for 4-B. We cured a plague that had been killing millions for 3 centuries. Sarah replied evenly. I thought that was considered a good thing. Without proper authorization forms, without environmental impact studies, without letting people die while bureaucrats debated. Sarah's voice carried an edge now. But please, lead the way. I'm curious to hear what the council wants from us this time. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a sphere within a sphere where gravity generators allowed representatives to orient themselves according to their species' preferences. The humans, as always, occupied the section designated for primitive bipeds along with 3 other recently discovered species. Chancellor Vexthal, the ancient Etherian who had presided over the council for 6 centuries, materialized at the chamber's center. His energy form pulsed with official authority as his translated voice filled the space. We are convened to address the concerning behavior of species to aid for 7H, colloquially known as humans. In the past galactic standard year, this species has committed numerous violations of established protocols. The charges scrolled across holographic displays in 47 different languages and symbol systems. Sarah read them with growing incredulity. Violation 1. Unauthorized terraforming of -1 uninhabited worlds without proper environmental surveys lasting the required 50-year period. Ambassador Chen stood. Those worlds were dead rocks. We turned them into gardens. People are living there now, breathing clean air, growing food. Violation 2. Interference with natural plague evolution on Kepler for 4-B, disrupting an ecosystem that had achieved stable mortality rates. Stable mortality rates. Sarah's voice rose. You mean the plague that was killing 90% of the population? Violation 3. Refusal to submit to mandatory genetic standardization procedures designed to eliminate aggressive tendencies. At this, Sarah went very still. Around the chamber, the other human representatives, all 12 of them representing humanity's scattered colonies, began to shift uncomfortably. Genetic standardization, Sarah repeated slowly. You want to change our DNA. Chancellor Vexthal energy form brightened. All successful species undergo this process. It eliminates war, reduces resource competition, and creates more harmonious societies. The Catherian collective submitted to the process 3,000 years ago. The Zephyrian Empire 2,000 years ago. It is standard. And what happened to those species' birth rates after this standardization? A pause. Birth rates stabilized at replacement levels. Population growth ceased to be a concern. You mean they stopped having children? Overpopulation ceased to be an issue? Yes. Sarah looked around the chamber, really seeing it for the first time. 47 species, but when had she last seen a child of any of them? When had she seen new art, new music, new ideas that weren't committee-approved variations on ancient themes? How many species were there in the galaxy before the Council was formed? She asked. The question seemed to catch the Chancellor off guard. Irrelevant. The current membership represents all significant civilizations. That's not what I asked. Sarah's voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years as a prosecutor before becoming a diplomat. How many species existed before the Council? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, a new voice spoke. Historian Zenel of the Archive Collective, whose species served as the galaxy's official record keepers. Records indicate approximately 12,000 sentient species achieved space flight capability in the period before Council formation. Zenel's mechanical voice translated. Current membership stands at 47 species. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives, who had never questioned the official histories, began demanding explanations. Sarah waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. What happened to the other 11,953 species? Chancellor Vextel's form pulsed erratically. They were absorbed, standardized, made part of the greater harmony. You mean they were eliminated? Their genetic distinctiveness was deemed inefficient. Sarah Chen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her species' future on her shoulders. Around the chamber, the other human representatives were looking at her with expressions of growing horror and determination. I need to understand this correctly, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The Galactic Council's standard procedure is to force all member species to undergo genetic modification that eliminates their distinctive traits, stops their population growth, and essentially turns them into sterile copies of an approved template. The process ensures galactic peace and harmony? Chancellor Vextel insisted. War becomes impossible when all species think alike. Resource conflicts end when populations stabilize. It is the path to utopia. It's the path to extinction with extra steps, Sarah replied. And you want humanity to voluntarily submit to this process. It is not voluntary. The Catherian representative clicked. Council Mandate 7739X requires all member species to undergo standardization within 50 standard years of first contact. Humanity has been members for 47 years. Sarah looked at her fellow human representatives. She saw her own determination reflected in their faces. These weren't just diplomats, they were parents, teachers, artists, scientists, dreamers. They were human. Then I suppose we have a decision to make, she said quietly, and we've made it. She turned to address the entire chamber, her voice strong and clear. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We reject your standardization, we reject your templates. We reject your version of harmony that requires the death of diversity. The chamber exploded into chaos, but Sarah continued speaking, her voice somehow carrying over the din. We came to the stars to explore, to learn, to grow. We didn't come here to be turned into pale copies of some committee's idea of perfection. If that makes us dangerous, if that makes us unfit for your council, then so be it. The human representatives moved as one, filing out of their designated section and heading for the chamber's exits. But Chancellor Vextel's voice boomed after them, filled with something that might have been panic. You cannot simply leave. The standardization process is for your own good. Without it, you will destroy yourselves with war and competition. Sarah paused at the chamber's threshold. Maybe we will. Maybe that's the price of being truly alive. But that's our choice to make, not yours. You don't understand. The Chancellor's form was pulsing frantically now. We need you. Humanity is the first species in 3 millennia to develop faster than light. Communication, your scientific advances, your art, your unpredictable innovations, the Council needs that diversity. Then you shouldn't have tried to destroy it, Sarah replied. Wait, the voice came from the Zephyrian representative, its feathered form rustling with agitation. If humans leave, who will solve the Kepler crisis? Who will develop new terraforming techniques? Who will Figure it out yourselves, said Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's chief scientific representative. Or better yet, learn to live with problems instead of eliminating everyone who might solve them differently than you would. The human delegation made their way through the station's corridors as news of their withdrawal spread. Other species representatives watched them pass with expressions ranging from confusion to admiration to fear. Some of the younger representatives from recent council additions began to follow, whispering among themselves. Ambassador Chen noticed the small group trailing behind them. Can we help you? A tall, crystalline being from the newly inducted Resonance Collective spoke in harmonious tones. Our species has been scheduled for standardization next year. We had questions about the process, and now you have answers. Sarah replied gently. The question is, what will you do with them? At the docking bay, the human ships waited, not the sleek, uniform vessels preferred by Council species, but a chaotic mixture of designs reflecting humanity's diverse approaches to engineering. Military vessels with angular, aggressive lines, exploration ships with sensor arrays like metallic flowers, colony ships that looked like traveling cities. As the humans prepared to depart, Chancellor Vexthal appeared one final time, his energy form flickering with what might have been desperation. You're making a mistake, he said. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Without the Council's protection, without standardization, you'll fragment into competing factions. You'll war among yourselves. You'll burn out like so many others. Sarah. Chen paused at the airlock of her vessel. Maybe, but we'll do it as ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find a better way. The human fleet departed Galactic Council space without ceremony, their faster-than-light drives carrying them toward the galaxy's outer rim where unclaimed systems waited. Behind them, the Council station buzzed with unprecedented activity. For the first time in millennia, the Council faced a crisis they couldn't solve by committee. Humanity had been responsible for 60% of their technological innovations, 70% of their artistic contributions, and 90% of their impossible problem solutions. Their withdrawal left gaps that no amount of standardized thinking could fill. Emergency sessions convened. Ancient protocols were dusted off and examined. Proposals were drafted, debated, and discarded. But the fundamental problem remained. How do you innovate when you've eliminated innovation? How do you solve new problems when you've trained yourself to only think in approved ways? Within weeks, other species began asking uncomfortable questions. The Resonance Collective formally requested a delay in their standardization. The Thermal Dancers submitted a proposal to reverse their modification process. Even some of the older Council members began to wonder if the price of peace had been too high. Chancellor Vexthal, facing the first real challenge to his authority in centuries, made an unprecedented decision. He dispatched envoys to find the human fleet and negotiate their return. Captain Marcus Webb of the human exploration vessel Endless Horizon was cataloging a new solar system when his communications officer reported incoming ships. The vessels were unlike anything in the standard Council fleet, sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Webb of the Endless Horizon. You are entering human-claimed space without authorization. The response came in perfect, unaccented English. Captain Webb, we are envoys of the Galactic Council. We request permission to approach and negotiate. Negotiate what, exactly? We've made our position clear. The Council recognizes that mistakes may have been made. We wish to discuss terms for humanity's return. Marcus couldn't help but smile. 3 months. It had taken them 3 months to realize what they'd lost. Permission denied. You want to talk to humans? You can find Ambassador Chen on New Geneva. She's our official representative for Council affairs. Captain, please. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions, resource rights, territorial expansion, even exemptions from certain standardization requirements. I'm not the one you need to convince. And I should mention you're not the first Council ships to come looking for us. Word of advice, The Zephyrians didn't take no for an answer, either. Didn't work out well for them. New Geneva was humanity's newest colony, a terraformed world in the Kepler 440 to system, the same system where humans had violated council protocols by curing a plague. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially the Kepler natives who had survived the plague and now served as humanity's strongest allies. Ambassador Chen stood in the planet's capital city, looking out over streets that bustled with humans, Kepler natives, and representatives from a dozen other species who had followed humanity's example and left the council. The city was chaotic, loud, and wonderfully alive. The council envoys are requesting a meeting, her aide informed her. They're offering what they call unprecedented concessions. Let me guess, Sarah said without turning from the window. They want us back, but they still want to change who we are. That's actually accurate. They're offering a modified standardization process that would preserve some human characteristics while eliminating what they call excessive aggressive tendencies. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. They still don't get it. Send them a message. Tell them humanity is not for sale, not for rent, and not subject to modification. If they want to coexist with us, they need to accept us as we are, and if they refuse. Sarah turned from the window, her expression serious. Then they can try to force the issue. But they should know that the galaxy is a much bigger place than they remember, and humanity has been making friends. The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a station built by the Kepler natives with human assistance. It was a marvel of organic architecture, its living walls pulsing gently with bioluminescent light. The council envoys found it disturbing too, chaotic to unpredictable. Chancellor Vexthal materialized in the conference room, his energy form less stable than usual. Across from him sat not just Ambassador Chen, but representatives from 17 species that had left the Council in humanity's wake. This is unprecedented, the Chancellor began. The formation of a counter-alliance threatens the very stability of galactic civilization. What threatens stability is forcing everyone to be the same, replied Kepler, the Kepler representative whose people had survived both plague and Council assistance. You nearly let my people die rather than risk an unauthorized cure. You call that stability? The processes exist for good reason. The processes exist to maintain control, interrupted Sarah, and control requires conformity. But here's the thing, Chancellor, conformity isn't natural, it's not sustainable, and it's not inevitable. She gestured to the room around them. Look at this station, built by cooperation between species that remain distinct, that argue, that compete, that create new solutions because they think differently. It's not perfect, it's not harmonious, but it's alive. The Chancellor's form flickered. Your alliance won't last. Without standardization, you'll fragment. Species will war against each other. You'll destroy what you've built. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged. But maybe we'll build something better. Maybe diversity is worth the risk. Back on the Council station, the emergency sessions continued. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Crop failures that the standardized agricultural protocols couldn't address. Technological problems that required innovative thinking. Artistic stagnation that was leaving entire populations listless and depressed. The Catherian representative clicked nervously as it addressed the assembly. The human departure has created cascading effects. Productivity is down 17%. Innovation indices have dropped to historic lows. Morale across multiple species is declining. Then we force them to return, suggested the Zephyrian delegate. Military action, blockades, economic sanctions, with what? Asked historian Zentel, his mechanical voice carrying unusual emotion. Our military thinking has been standardized for millennia. Our strategies are predictable, human. Tactical analysis suggested 12 different ways to defeat our standard formations. Chancellor Vexthal energy form pulsed with frustration. There must be a solution. Calculate the probability matrices. Run the projection algorithms. We have, Zentel replied. All models suggest the same outcome without diversity of thought. We cannot adapt to new challenges. The arrival of humanity reminded us what we had lost. Their departure makes it impossible to ignore. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. The council faced a choice: evolve or slowly die. But evolution required change, and change was exactly what they had spent millennia trying to eliminate. 3 months after the failed negotiations, an unexpected message arrived at New Geneva. It wasn't from the council leadership, but from a group calling itself the Diversity Coalition, younger representatives from multiple council species, who had been studying humanity's alternatives. The message was simple: we want to learn. Ambassador Chen found herself facing a new kind of diplomatic challenge. The coalition wasn't asking for humanity to return to the council. Instead, they wanted to send observers to study how diverse societies could function without standardization. It's a risk, her aide warned. This could be a council trick, infiltration, intelligence gathering. Sarah considered the possibility. Could be. But if it's genuine, it might be our best chance to create real change. Not just for us, but for the galaxy. The first group of observers arrived 2 weeks later, young representatives from 15 different species, all volunteers who were risking their careers by participating in an unauthorized study. They were nervous, curious, and completely unprepared for what they found. New Geneva was everything the council had taught them to fear: chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes violent. But it was also creative, innovative, and vibrantly alive. They watched humans argue passionately about art, then collaborate seamlessly on scientific projects. They saw conflicts resolved through debate rather than committee decree. They witnessed the birth of new ideas that no standardized society could have produced. The observers' reports, transmitted back to their home worlds, sparked something the council hadn't seen in millennia: grassroots dissent. Citizens who had never questioned the standardization process began asking uncomfortable questions. Artists began creating works that deviated from approved templates. Scientists started proposing experiments that hadn't been committee approved. Chancellor Vextel tried to suppress the reports, but the damage was done. Information spread through networks the council couldn't monitor, carried by species that had learned to hide their communications. The very stability the council had worked to maintain began to crack. On Kither Prime, the insectoid population experienced their first unauthorized births in 2,000 years. On Zephyr, young citizens began refusing their scheduled modification appointments. On the ancient world of ethereal energy beings began experimenting with forms their ancestors had abandoned millennia ago. The council's emergency sessions became daily occurrences, then hourly ones. The standardization system that had maintained galactic peace for thousands of years was failing, and they had no contingency plans because planning for failure had been deemed pessimistic thinking and eliminated from their cognitive patterns. Ambassador Chen received the final council transmission on a warm morning as New Geneva's twin suns painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The message was from Chancellor Vextel himself, and for the first time since she'd known him, his energy form seemed somehow diminished. Ambassador Chen, the translation began. The Galactic Council formally requests your guidance in addressing the current crisis. Sarah read the message 3 times, hardly believing what she was seeing. The Council, the ancient, all-powerful Galactic Council, was asking humanity for help. The full message was unprecedented. The Council acknowledged that their standardization process had eliminated crucial diversity, that their pursuit of harmony had created stagnation, and that their fear of change had brought them to the brink of civilizational collapse. They weren't asking humanity to return. They were asking humanity to teach them how to survive. Sarah called an emergency session of the new alliance, the growing coalition of species that had followed humanity's example. The debate that followed was intense, with opinions ranging from let them collapse to help them rebuild. In the end, it was the Kepler representative who provided the deciding argument. They tried to kill us with kindness, thinking they knew what was best for us. Now they're asking us to teach them that different doesn't mean dangerous. How can we refuse? The process of destandardization was slow and painful. Species that had been genetically modified over thousands of years couldn't simply return to their original forms, but they could learn to think differently, to value diversity, to see difference as strength rather than threat. Humanity provided the framework, but each species had to find their own path. The Cytherians rediscovered individual expression within their collective consciousness. The Zephyrians learned to channel their natural competitiveness into creative rather than destructive pursuits. The Ethereals began to experiment with physical forms again, remembering the joy of sensation they had abandoned. The galaxy didn't become peaceful overnight. There were conflicts, disagreements, and yes, occasional violence, but there was also growth, innovation, and a kind of vibrant creativity that hadn't been seen for millennia. New art forms emerged from the intersection of different cultures. Scientific breakthroughs came from collaborations between species that thought in fundamentally different ways. Problems that had seemed unsolvable for centuries found solutions when approached from multiple perspectives. 5 years after humanity's dramatic departure, a new institution emerged, the Galactic Diversity Council. Unlike its predecessor, this organization was designed not to enforce conformity but to celebrate difference. Its charter, written collaboratively by dozens of species, enshrined the right to genetic and cultural self-determination. Ambassador Chen found herself in the unexpected position of serving as the first human coordinator, working alongside representatives who had learned to see their differences as assets rather than problems. The new council chambers were a cacophony of sounds, shapes, and ideas, everything the old council had feared. It's messier, she admitted to the gathered representatives during their first formal session. It's louder, more chaotic, and yes, sometimes more dangerous, but it's also more honest, more creative, and more alive than anything we had before. The Cytherian representative, now free to express individual thoughts within the collective consciousness, clicked thoughtfully. Our analysis suggests that chaos and creativity are fundamentally linked. The old council chose order over innovation. We choose differently, and if we're wrong, ask the Zephyrian delegate. If diversity leads to the conflicts the old council feared. Sarah looked around the chamber at the incredible variety of life forms that had come together not in spite of their differences, but because of them. Then we'll face those conflicts as ourselves, not as pale copies of someone else's idea of perfection. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find solutions that none of us could have discovered alone. Historian Zettel, now serving as the Diversity Council's chief archivist, compiled the final report on what scholars were already calling the Great Awakening. The statistics were remarkable. Galactic innovation had increased by over 300%. Birth rates were recovering across multiple species, and new art forms were emerging at an unprecedented pace. But the most significant change couldn't be measured in statistics. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy's civilizations were truly alive, growing, changing, evolving. The price of that vitality was uncertainty, conflict, and the constant challenge of coexistence between fundamentally different ways of thinking. It was a price that more and more species decided was worth paying. The human experiment had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, not by forcing change on others, but by demonstrating that there was an alternative to stagnation. By walking away from the table, humanity had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to compromise your essential nature. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, full of possibilities that no committee could have imagined and no standardization process could have approved. And in the vast expanse of space, countless voices joined in a chorus not of harmony, but of beautiful, chaotic, essential diversity. The galaxy was alive again.